Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 507. This program is in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu Altes Allah Shalom and in merit of Baruch ben Yomen ben Menucha Lana Altes, Yikusil ben Leah Rochel and Rochel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Tadris ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rochel Altes. So we're now entering into the 9 days, Rosh Chodesh Av, tonight. The beginning of the saddest period in the calendar, within the 3 weeks, the 9 days where the mourning intensifies due to the tragic events that happened throughout history in this period of time, leading to Tisha B'Av. So we should merit to have Mashiach already here before then, and then Tisha B'Av will be the greatest day of Yomim Tevim, and Yehavchi Yom Meil L'Moyedim Tevim L'Moyedim L'Simcha L'Yom Tevim. These days should be transformed only to celebration. But meanwhile, while we're still in Golus, we honor and we recognize these significant days. And as we know, these aren't just days that happened back then. Hayom Ma'el Niskanim V'Nasim. In a way, we are honoring and we are recognizing, humbly recognizing all tragic events throughout history, which is one of the reasons that we don't create another Tisha B'Av or another 9 days. You could say, what about the Holocaust? What about other tragic events? Because those, in a sense, just like we don't create another Shabbos, every Shabbos repeats what happened the previous Shabbos. Same thing with Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot. We know time is like a spiral. So the events that happened back then are actually happening right now. So when we talk about Tisha B'Av, we talk about the 9 days, we're talking about all sad events that are honored and commemorated during this time. When I say honored, I want to emphasize, I don't mean honored necessarily in a good way. Honored means recognized, commemorated, being recreated. It's a beautiful Sikha, Purim Tavshin Tazayin, where the Rebbe, based on TAA, explains why we don't create another Purim for other victories we've had, just like another Chanukah, because those Moedim Klolim, so to speak, contain all the celebrations, and just like the negative days contain all the negative events. So when we honor Tisha B'Av, we're honoring all the Tisha B'Avs and all the sad events that happened throughout history. So the 9 days in many ways is like the energy, you can call it the negative energy. Just as we say, Shenichnas Adar Marben B'Simcha, that the month of Adar is a time of Simcha, all Simchas. Same thing, Mishanichnas of Mamaytim B'Simcha. We diminish in things of Simcha. The Munkach says, the Minchas Elazar teaches, Mamaytim, we mamayit the of through Simcha, through a Simcha that's allowed al pi halacha, which is really the ultimate emphasis in Chassidus in general, especially the Rebbe, that though the 9 days do represent the lowest point, but the Rebbe always was focusing on how do we turn it into something positive? How do we just recognize within it the deepest powers, the deepest light? So Chamisha Asabav will be the greatest Yom Tif, like Lo Yoy Yom Tov Yisrael, Ki Chamisha Asabav Kiyama Kippurim, because it comes after the Yerid of Tisha B'Av, as the Arizal says, and the Chassidus explains. And on Tisha B'Av we know is also the birth of Mashiach. But the goal is that we already in the beginning of the 9 days we should recognize the positive power. So on one hand, yes, we have to recognize and we have to honor, to do whatever it takes to remember the negative, but the goal is not to remain negative. It's like the Rebbe brings from Yalkut Shmeini that says that in the month of Aryeh, which is the month of Av, Ba Aryeh, came the lion, which is Nebuchadnezzar, and destroyed the lion, which is the Beis Hamikdash. Almanas, on condition that in the month of Aryeh, in the month of Av, will come the Aryeh Shag Mila Yira, the Ebershter, and rebuild the Aryeh, the lion, the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi. So it's a transformation. And then we'll have an eternal Beis Hamikdash, Mikdash Adonai Ken Yadecha, far greater than the first Beis Hamikdash and the second Beis Hamikdash. So the goal is, how can we, according to Pi Halacha and Pi Teira, look at these days in such a fashion? That's the challenge. And that's essentially the challenge of our time. So as we go into the Rosh Chodesh Av, We have to think of it that way. I remember Tov Shalom at Hey, the Rebbe had a Fabring in Erev Rosh Chodesh Av, the night of Rosh Chodesh Av. And the Rebbe started the Fabring saying, you need a good explanation. It's not a time to make a Fabring in the 9 days. And the Rebbe brought a din halacha that you're not supposed to play music in the 9 days, except someone who's parnosa, klezmer as it's called, people who are musicians, and that's their parnosa, they're allowed to, because for their parnosa, they're not doing it for enjoyment and leisure and pleasure alone. And the Rebbe says, since my parnosa is to do what I do, including a fabrenga, so b'meila, that's the heter. The Rebbe said it with a smile, but we can also understand there's something deeper here. It means his work is to reveal, even in the dark 9 days, the simcha, the fabrenga shebezeh. And again, in the form of Torah. Al pi Torah, al pi halacha, not chaz v'sham in any other way. Pekudei Hashem yisharim mesamchei lev, which is why the Rebbe emphasized everything that al pi Torah you're allowed to do. We make siyumim in the 9 days, as the Rebbe Rashab instituted, not because we eat meat or a meal, because a siyum is a gemara shel Torah, creates a form of simcha al pi Torah. We learn the halach hilchos beis habchira. We learn about the Beis Hamikdash in the Rambam, in the Mishnah Masechta Midas, in the Pesukim in the Sefer Yecheskel. Tziyim b'mishpat tepada v'shaveh b'tzedakah, as we'll say in the Haftarah next Shabbos Chazain, that tziyim is redeemed through mishpat, through halacha, through Mishnah, and its captives, hostages, through tzedakah, through charity. So finding every possible way that you could find simcha to be mamayitin ba'av b'simcha. Mamayitin in the matters of negative of Av, to reveal the menachem in Av. Because Av refers to the negative. That Shalah brings Av, Rosh Tevis, Edom, Bavel. These are the two enemies that destroyed the second and the first temple respectively, Edom and Bavel. And the Kavon is Menachem of the Menachem, to comfort, to transform, which is the whole purpose of it all. So this is a general lesson for all of us at all times as we enter into Rosh Chodesh Av. Now this is clearly so much more pronounced and acute in our very time, because we're literally living in a time of crisis. Look what's going on, besides what has happened since Simchas Torah, and not to minimize that, and the hostages, Shaveh. Seen b'mishpat tepada v'shaveh b'tzedakah, the captives and hostages taken in Gaza, and all the tragedies and atrocities connected to that, which is still schlepping along. Now recently we've had more challenges, more attacks, and Israel has responded. And of course our enemies are furious and want to respond. Al tiftach peh, but that's what we're hearing. So questions have been coming in to me, and I'm sure everybody's asking, what do we do? It's a fearful time if you think about it. I mean, you can ignore it, but if you don't ignore these events, it seems very frightening. What's going to happen next? They're literally threatening attacks. So let's address how to address the current crisis following the assassination of prominent terrorist leaders. Haniya of Hamas, one of the big commanders in Hezbollah. And in general, we see it's unfortunately an accelerating situation in a negative way, because we're dealing with sworn enemies who just refuse to let go. And then when you hear things coming from the United States, that's not exactly unequivocally supporting Israel, creates even more doubts. What do we do? Should we be afraid of our enemies threatening us? So couldn't it be more fitting time than the 9 days, because that's exactly what the 9 days are about. Enemies that threatened us, and not only threatened us, hurt us. So the positive message of seeing even in the negative, the positive, couldn't be more relevant than now. So Punktash Gocha Pratis, reading a sikha from the Rebbe of this period in time, Tov Shin Lamed Daled, talking about 1974. It was Thursday night, Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av then. And the Rebbe is speaking about exactly this question. Should people be afraid? That's not, of course, the first time the Rebbe spoke about it. We know the classic Sicha Lag B'Omer Tovshin Chav Zayin, right before the 6-day war. The Rebbe said, when their Brider and Schwester, our brothers and sisters in Israel, find themselves in a matzav, a situation that was sakana. And with a lot of fear then. People prepared for who knows what. I don't even want to say what they prepared for. Thousands of graves were buried, were being dug in public parks in Israel, preparing for who knows. And the Rebbe strengthened Eden and said there's nothing to be afraid. Obviously you have to do what you have to do. So that was one. But almost every time, I would say every time there was any fright, the Rebbe addressed it. But here it's interesting, it's so prescient and so relevant. I just want to read a few lines, I'll translate into English, from this Sikha. Again, it's Thursday night, Parsha Matas Maseh, Erev Rosh Chodesh Menachemov. So the Rebbe says, now's the time to inspire and to re-encourage about the 5 Mivtzoyim. At the time there was 5 Mivtzoyim that the Rebbe instituted. Mivtze Tfilin, of course, came by the 6-day war. Mivtze Mezuzah came after Ma'alot, the terrorist attack on children in a school in Ma'alot in northern Israel. And then Mivtze Teira, and Mivtze Tzedakah, and Mivtze Bayis Molis Farim. So those were the 5 Mivtzoyim. In the subsequent years, the Rebbe would add the 3 for the women. The Rosh Tevis Chana, which is Kashrus, Taras Mishpacha, and Ner Shabbos Kedish. And then Chinuch and Avis Yisrael, which is the 10 Mivtzoyim. But he's talking about the 5 Mivtzoyim, which have a Zgula Miyached, as the Rebbe says, a particular feature of protecting Eden from Dvarim HaMazikim, from destructive forces. So you see from this, and we know this, that the Rebbe's response to all the challenges, especially in Israel, were the Mivtzoyim, which of course affects Eden everywhere. And he compares it to Ori Miklat, which is of course in Parshas Maseh, which we read yesterday. Ori Miklat, which protects, Miklat Megoyel, protects from all dangerous attacks. So he says, now's the time to lahag b'chayil or lahesiv keyach in all these mivtzoyim mitashturim or bedar keneyam, to give people in Eden as much strength and as much reinforcement as possible to protect them from anything that can happen in a way of mechatchila le'osem alecha ki ani Hashem leifecha. I, God, are your healer in a way that, not that I protect you after something negative happens, God forbid, but protect you preventive and preempting any negative things. The Rebbe continues and says, since today is right before the 9 days between Rosh Chodesh Av and Tisha B'Av, and the kavanah in them and their completion, their fulfillment is Yehavchu l'sasan l'simcha. So the Rebbe says, this is now a time to be mefarsim, to publicize what I'm going to be saying now to Eden everywhere, in Inyan Shazman Groma, to strengthen every Jew in Amunah and Betochen in the Eibishter, that even though it's a time of darkness, Zman Cheshach Koflo Mechuplo Vikvis Mashiach, a double darkness. So we should know that the whole reason for Golus is Mepnei Chateinu. That's the only reason. So even though Rome and before that Bavel were powerful empires, and the Jewish people are just a minority, they could not do anything to the Eden. And they had no control over the Eden, even though the numbers were not even comparable, because it's all mipnei chateinu, the Eibishter, because of that. It's not their power. So we shouldn't think that they have that power. And that's a Ra also now. That even though we're a kifsa achas, we're one sheep surrounded by 70 wolves, there's nothing to be afraid of, God forbid. And then people should not think, how can you sleep and continue doing your work with Teich Menucha in a peaceful way when we're surrounded by these 70 wolves? because the Eden are blessed by the Eibishter. Am levoded yishkin begoyim lo yischashev. You are a singular nation, and don't be afraid, and don't consider, and don't in any way concern yourself with the nations around you. God protects you. And the Rebbe goes on and says that even though there's obviously we live in a world of nature, and in Simcha unless we don't rely on miracles, so we have to do whatever we can to protect ourselves. But the fear, the Eibishter protects the Yiddish people. And he goes on and speaks about how we gain that strength by connecting with Amunah and Betochen in the Eibishter. It's worthwhile reading this Sikha, which is already published. It's not Muga, but it's published. The Rebbe goes on to speak about the uniqueness of the Yiddish people. And the Rebbe says, I'm not saying these words just to calm people down. But this is amitis hadover, this is the truth. That the power of Eden lies in the fact that we're connected to Hashem, and through the Ovis and the Emois, and all the generations before us. And that's why we are here today. Then he goes on to speak about the Mivtzoyim again, that gives strength. That's what connects us. That eliminates the Mepnei Chata'enu and creates unity and creates strength that brings down Hashem's keiches, especially through the chinuch of children, Mipe'elim v'yenkin yisad de'ez lahash b'sevim misnakim, from the mouths of babes, of sucklings, of little children, infants, that when they say Torah, in whatever way they can say it, that destroys the enemies. The Rebbe says words from the heart enter the heart, so therefore there's no question that this will have its pu'ula. And hini le'yonu v'le'yushin Shem Yisrael, wherever Yidden are, and especially in Eretz Yisrael. And especially in this time, he says in the 9 days, we have to add in Teda and in Tzedakah, Mishpat and Tzedakah, which strengthens all these points. And brings all the brachas that will be the closer brachas, v'yishavtem levetoch ba'artzachem, v'yiselechem l'lukim v'atem tili la'am, eilecheschem kememias. We shouldn't have any concerns. A klara sikha that tells us exactly how to behave in a time like this. And it was clearly not easy times. So the answer is to be afraid, no. To be prudent, yes. Obviously, we have to do everything possible to protect ourselves, to fight our enemies, to preempt anything that has to be preempted. But we have to know that we have something strong to hold on to. What more relevant message than today? I cannot tell you how many notes I've gotten already just in the last few days. MyLife Chassidus Applied, just about this. So I thought appropriate to really put strong emphasis because it's such a timely matter. So it's not just about not being afraid, it's on the contrary, to be strong and to strengthen our connection to Hashem, to strengthen our connection to Torah mitzvahs, to all the forces and all the strengths that give us power to deal with any challenge. And there's more to say this, which I will throughout this program. So then, what do the 98 days teach us today? Very clearly, it teaches us that despite the fact, yes, it's true that's 9 days, and the Gemara, the Mishnah and the Gemara explain what happened during the 9 days, that we should understand that that is because between us and Hashem. It's not because anyone has any power over us. At the same time, the whole purpose of the 9 days is transforming them. That's what it teaches us. So how does this time period help us face challenges? By recognizing exactly that, the almanas. The entire destruction is in order to build something even greater. So obviously we cry over the fact that there was a churm and over the other negative events. But we also remember Rabbi Akiva's laugh after the crying. Because ultimately, just as these negative events were fulfilled, we know that the next prophecy will be fulfilled, that they will lead to something far greater. And Akiva nechamtani, and Akiva comforts us, as his colleague said, and we say, So we have to look with those deeper eyes. And that's exactly what the 9 days are for. They're not just to remind us that negative things happen. They remind us that even when negative things happen, mamayitin ba'ov, shenichnas of, mamayitin of, b'simcha. With simcha shel Torah and simcha shel mitzvah, and of Avos Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael, and especially the mitzvahs and mivtzoyim that have that unique feature of connecting us, uniting us, and fending off any negative forces and enemies. How does Rosh Chodesh Av empower us? Being that the 9 days begin with Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Chodesh we know is also a shtickle Yom Tov. It's Av, but it's still Rosh Chodesh. So indeed, the Torah tells us. We learn in Parashat Chukas, what the Istalkus, the passing of Aaron HaKohen, Kohen Gadol, was Rosh Chodesh Av. Why of all days Rosh Chodesh Av? Because we have a concept called Magdim Refuah L'Maka. Before we have an illness, before we have a negative, we're always given the healing that precedes it. What did Aaron HaKohen embody, personify? Unity. Hillel says, Hava mitamidav shel, be from the students of Aaron. Eyev shalom v'reidav shalom. Pursue peace, love peace, and pursue peace. Eyev esabrias, love even the brias, as the Alter Rebbe explains in chapter 32 in Tanya. Even someone that you don't see any other quality, but he's a creature of Hashem, brias. Love him. Umekarven l'Torah. And bring him closer to Torah. Aaron was exemplary and exemplified shalom. He would make shalom ben ish v'isha, between husband and wife, between friends and people who were arguing with each other. That was his personality. That was his power. So what better time do we have when the day of the Yortzeit is the day when the Tzaddik's Aveda, as the Alter Rebbe explains in the Geras HaKedesh, that all his Aveda gathers together and elevates, and Peil Yeshua's Bekerev Haaretz, and affects Yeshua's redemption, salvation's Bekerev Haaretz, even in the abyss, even in the depths of this earth. Ad mipnei chateinu gelinim artzeinu, sinas chinam, baseless hatred and divisiveness was the cause of the destruction of the second temple. So comes Aaron, the Chodesh Av, 9 days before the destruction, and says, Eyev shalom v'reidav shalom. That's the preemptive antidote to the Churban Beis HaMikdash. Unity. Tzedakah, Avos Yisrael, Achdus Yisrael. And all the mitzvahs, as the Alter Rebbe Taka explains in chapter 32. That's why Rabbi Akiva said, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Hillel said, Zuhi kol ha-Torah kula. Avos Yisrael, Mad olach soni lechavercha lesavid. Because it captures all of Torah and mitzvahs, which is Akbaras Atzur Alachem, like he says, that nafshe ikeh v'gufei tofel. That spirit should be predominant and materialism should be secondary. Materialism divides, spirituality unites. So Rosh Chodesh Av, tonight, we're given that power. Magdim Refuah L'Maka. In 5 days from now, from Rosh Chodesh will be the 5th of Av, and that is the Yortzeit of the Arizal. Yet another Koyach of Achdus. The Arizal's Ma'achid Nigla Torah and Primis HaTorah is Ma'achid Eden. He united Jews of all sectors. Sfardim, Ashkenazim, Chassidim, non-Chassidim. Like Rashbi in his time, whose his Yortzeit, his Yom Elul is like Ba'emer. Also Sfiras Emer when there was Leinogu Kovid Zebazeh. All antidotes to the negative power of divisiveness. All to teach us what we need now more than ever. And when we're all strong together, united, nothing can touch us. As we learn from Medrash, Chaz v'Shalom, what Pira does. When there's Achdus, even if it's Achdus by the enemy, unfortunately, it has a certain power, especially Achdus by Kedushin. Unity, as the Medrash says in Nitzavim, it compares the Eden to the stalks of wheat. So the stalks are separate, they're not that strong, but when you put them together, atem nitzom mayem kulchem, they're unbreakable, indestructible. So this is all about revealing the inner power of which lies within the 9 days. The Yehovchu, the transformation of it all. Can we expect that the sadness of this period will be transformed to joy? Absolutely. And as one person wrote like this, just read it, it was nicely written. In this year where everything is upside down and Simchas Torah became a sad day of mourning, we're already seeing how the 3 weeks are being transformed into days of joy, since 3 of the biggest arch-terrorists in the world have been incinerated by the Mossad this week. May God bless Hashem for showing us mercy and helping transform sadness to joy. May God continue to protect Israel and destroy our enemies. Okay. And may we already have enough of that and eliminate them completely, the enemy, that we don't need to fight any more battles and wars. And march straight into the Gula Amitis Vashlema. Enough is enough. So since we're talking on this topic, so there's a few questions that people asked about it. Let's talk about it. And Kol Esek B'Teiros, when you talk about the Torah of something, even the Torah of assassination or the Torah of dealing with enemies, that itself, the learning Torah of it, eliminates, so you don't have to deal with it in actuality. As the Rebbe explains, a number of sichos and Yaakov Esav Amurim B'Parsha, that when Yaakov and Esav are in the Parsha, it's Torah. So Torah has its unique power to be able to achieve things that we don't have to actually fight in the battle for. The Halavai, we can just study it in Torah, and that should eliminate every negative force and bring the Geula. Okay. So someone asked the question, is it wise to assassinate the enemy's leaders? Here's how it was written out. In the last few days, Israel assassinated the top leader of Hamas, the second top leader of Hezbollah, and the top Iranian general of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard terrorists. Is this a good idea, or will they just install new leaders that might even be more homicidal than their predecessors? Has the Rebbe ever made statements supporting the military strategy of cutting off the head of the snake, or based on the Rebbe's teachings, would he say it would be a better idea to mail everyone in Iran a copy of the 7 Noahide mitzvahs, and that is a better method to achieve peace? Well, let's start. The Torah speaks, obviously, we don't want to have any war, we don't have any bloodshed. But when you're dealing with a sworn enemy, Pekuach Nefesh is number one. Protection. Siman Shin Chavtes. It's the whole basis that you're dealing with a sworn enemy. So even if they come to you to negotiate and discuss matters of commerce, Kash v'Teven, on Shabbos you have to mobilize because they're on your border and they're a threat. Even on a doubt, even on a sofek or svek. So you're dealing with it. It's not an offensive war. We're not going on aggressive war here. It's protecting ourselves against enemies. Every reaction that Israel has had was due to something. Hezbollah bombed children, killed children, not even Jewish children. Doesn't matter. October 7th was provoked by Hamas. Iran attacked Israel, and they call for the destruction of Israel. Let's not forget where it all originates from. I feel even ridiculous to have to defend it. Ridiculous is not really the right word. I feel like, it's a given, but sometimes you have to spell everything out. So let's make that very clear here. There's war going on. So absolutely, you have to do everything possible to eliminate the enemy. Now, I'm not here to talk about war strategy and military strategy. That's already a matter, like the Rebbe would always say, you have to ask the mumchim, the experts, military experts, not political experts, not diplomats. Just like a doctor. Should you perform surgery? Should you not perform surgery? Should you medicate? Should you do? These are doctor questions. But the general approach has to be without any type of diplomatic and other political calculations. You're talking about life and death here. Life and death, literally. So to cut off the head of the snake, absolutely. And again, I'm not the strategist here, but maybe they should cut off many more heads. The fact that they may replace them with someone, I mean, if they killed Hitler, Yimach Shemoy, or killed other leaders, you don't start saying maybe someone else. First of all, killing a leader is demoralizing and humiliating, and that alone can win a war. And secondly, you don't think about what they're going to do next. You're going to leave an enemy in place because there may be someone worse. You have to do whatever it takes to win a war. And not rechenzech and consider other calculations. Obviously, it's always for the benefit of saving lives. That's the bottom line. Did the Rebbe make statements? His statements was always go all the way. During the Yom Kippur War, when things turned around, Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe said, go into Damascus, go into Cairo. Not to conquer it and not to settle there, but show them, go to the head, yes, the capital. There's a power when you go into a capital. It weakens psychologically the enemy, and they see what you're capable of. And it's an unbelievable deterrent. Yes, that's why you attack capitals. That's why you attack leaders. So the Rebbe didn't speak military strategy per se, but he was speaking about the general approach. Regarding sending Shev Mitzvah, in addition to everything, not in place. No. I don't think, let's be honest here, you're going to just send pamphlets of Shev Mitzvah to Tehran and say, oh, you know what? You're right. No, you're not supposed to kill. You're not supposed to murder. You should love all people. They're all created in the divine image. They're all children of Avraham Avinu. Alavai. But let's not be naive. In addition, that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to destroy the enemy and then hopefully re-educate the entire community, including the Muslim community, including the Iranians, including all of the enemies, with what God wants of them. But I think it has to be done in the proper timing and the proper balance. Another person asked, what can we learn from this assassination in Tehran, in a private place? I mean, it's a question. I'm reading it because someone wrote it. Is it significant that the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated in Tehran while he was in a private place, unguarded by his bodyguards, who just stayed in the next room? Does the Torah relate any similar stories of how such a place is a good place to attack an enemy while they are vulnerable? Perhaps the story of Pari going very early in the morning to the Nile, and that's where Moshe was able to get close to him, to say, let my people free from slavery. Is there a lesson here, an easy way to victory, attack the enemy when they are in a vulnerable place? Again, this is a matter I leave for strategists. Obviously, it makes sense where someone's vulnerable, they're less protected. That's the place to attack when you need to. And the lesson is, I guess that's the lesson with Pare, to remember they're all human beings, as wealthy as they may be, and as much as they're protected, they're all vulnerable. And to get them and show them that you could get them. And the rest of the enemies should also be aware and beware of what's possible to happen to them. My hope and our prayer is that they should wake up to it and surrender, and unconditional surrender, and hopefully we can end this whole nightmare. That's how I would look at it. Are we allowed to celebrate the deaths of our enemies? The deaths of the leaders of all these Iranian terrorist groups? Well, we have b'nefele vecha oyayevcha al tismach. We don't celebrate even the fall of our enemies. Not because we're not happy that they were killed, because they could have killed us, but because that's not what we focus on. We focus on the positive. We had to do that because there was no choice. So it's not about gloating. It's about being humble about it and actually crying that God, that people created by God in this world can fall to a place that the only option was left was to kill them. We're not happy about that. We're happy that in actuality it happened, because if not, who knows what would have happened. But that's not where our simcha is in bringing God to the world. That hopefully all these people can wake up and recognize that we're all created in the divine image, and they should all live up to it and protect every other person that is created b'tselem Elokim. That's what we want to celebrate. Okay. Someone asked, can we desecrate their graves? In the same spirit, I don't want to read the whole question, but he said, are we allowed to celebrate the death? Oh, before we get to that, just like we celebrate the demise of Haman and make fun of him and his pointy hat by eating hamantashen, can we celebrate and make fun of the Iranian terrorists and their hats and make a new celebratory cookie called turban tashen? I guess you're being a little Purim dick here. With Haman, first of all, we obliterate Haman because of Amalek. It's not about the celebration. The celebration is the Netzachim. It's not about the per se, the enemy. That's part of the negative, all of it. And obviously it has to be done. Haman Tashen, I don't know if we can learn anything from that. I don't know if it's making fun. I don't think we make fun of Haman. I think Purim is a festive day and we use everything for the festivity. So that's where I would keep it there. I wouldn't go ahead beyond that. About desecrating graves, so someone wrote, I'm on a trip to Doha, Qatar for business. They brought the body of Hamas terrorist Ismail Haniyeh here today for burial. The cemetery is not far from my hotel. Should I sneak in there at night and desecrate his grave? Would that be against the ethics of Torah? I would tell you, do not do that. No. Not because someone will catch you or because it'll be embarrassing or because Achil Hashem. It's not the way we celebrate. Learn more Torah, do more mitzvahs, thank Hashem, and pray to Hashem that we shouldn't need any more of this because the enemy will be completely Heim Kolim Aleim, completely disappear, and we won't need any more of this. That's what I would recommend. Okay. So in that spirit, again, of what is the best way to fight our enemies, how to treat our enemies, someone wrote the other way around. Yesterday, a small group of Israeli soldiers were arrested and held in jail awaiting a court-martial after information came out that they violently abused and tortured some of the Hamas prisoners they were guarding. While there's no doubt that those terrorists deserve everything they get, it's still very clear to me that these suspected tortures and abuses are wrong. If a Hamas terrorist is arrested, they have a right to a fair trial and be treated properly in jail while awaiting trial. What's very shocking to me is that large groups of Haredim took offense that the Israeli soldiers were arrested and went to the jail and rioted and attacked police and soldiers in an attempt to free the Israeli soldiers awaiting court-martial. These scenes were shown on the evening news and make us all look so bad as if we are all barbarians that support torturing prisoners. Again, this is another case of we being our own worst enemy. Can we ask Rabbi Jacobson what the Torah says we are required to do with enemy prisoners? If we look at King David, we know in self-defense he killed Goliath, but he doesn't say he tortured and abused him. If you think the Haredim that rioted are wrong, please quote the Torah sources that say they are wrong so they can learn from their mistakes and hopefully not do it again. So I think this goes without saying. I mean, they're exactly correct. There's a court of law. The Torah doesn't allow just people to be tortured for no reason. I say no reason. That's not a good statement, actually. Maybe there is reason after what they did. So I can understand the anger. But still, the Torah doesn't go ahead and say you just torture someone. I said no reason. I meant to say without due process. Torture is b'chal not an option. And they should put the full justice system should be brought upon them, and they should stand trial and absolutely deserve the worst penalty. If it's death, may it be death. So I think we all agree in that. As far as these Haredim, I don't understand at all what they choose to protest. I mean, why are they protesting the terrorists who took the hostages hostage? Are they trying to say that this is like the worst possible crime, and therefore abuse is the right thing we have to be doing? I can't get into their heads. So I don't understand their calculations and what they protest. And I don't want to defend it or attack it. I just think it's inappropriate. You have to leave it for a court of law. They're not being let go. They will hopefully be processed properly. And I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think you need a particular Chassidus Applied wisdom here to address this issue. But since someone wrote about it, I read it. Okay. Since we're talking all about this, so there's more bunch of questions since I'm talking about war in Israel. Let's do a few more questions on that, and then we'll move along here. Clearly, this is on everybody's mind, and for the right reason. Why do we have an enemy that wants to destroy us in every generation? Like we say in V'hisha Amdo. Why is that the case? So maybe that's connected to the very same question as why is there anti-Semitism? Halacha hi biyadua as Esav Seina Yaakov. From the beginning of time almost. So we've discussed this a number of times, whether it's because the Goyish world, the archetype of the Goyish world is materialistic and opposes godliness. So does it represent that? This doesn't mean all Goyim, because there are many Goyim today who are Malchus Shal Chesed and Chsidu Misa'elam. But representing that, so in every generation you have that, the attack on Jews is attack against God, essentially. Is that the reason? Is the reason because as long as we're in Golas, the Eibishter gave a certain strength to the other nations? As I mentioned earlier, not that they have strength over Yidden, but the bottom line is that we're under their control, Shibud Malchus. You can explain it. I'm not here to go explain it all. Just it's part of the same question: why is there Golas, and why we've suffered, and why in every generation yet another form of it, and why now yet again, after everything we've gone through, you think we're already at the threshold of Geula, as the Rebbe said. That's a big question. So what happened here? What are all these setbacks, so to speak? So these are God's mysteries, which I don't have an answer for. I just know that every challenge that we get, we have the power to deal with it. And we should not be afraid. We should be prudent. Dig deeper. Find the resources we need for ourselves, for our children, for our families. Do what needs to be done militarily, and do what needs to be done spiritually, as we discussed earlier with the Mivtzoyim and the Ruchnisdika things, the mitzvahs that have special Zgulas features to bring to add protection and to fight off and eliminate enemies. That's how we have to look at it. Why isn't there greater emphasis, Owen writes, on fighting radical Islam and its mandate to take over the world? So this is a longer question. I'll read it out. Hi, Rabbi. The individual writes their name. I usually don't like to read names. He says, we spent a couple Shabbos dinners with you and your parents in the late 90s and early 2000s. Your brother was my teacher at Mayanot Summer 1999. Thank you for all your great work and appreciate everything. Why isn't there greater emphasis on radical Islam and the mandate to take over the world? Why does radical Islam hate and not see Judaism within a healthy lens if it was created from Judaism? It copied and then manipulated the mitzvahs to serve the Arabs. Why is it seen as mutually exclusive? So I don't want to speak for them. It's all part of what an enemy is about. But I will say that I've done a lot of research and written quite a few articles, especially after 9/11, researching some of the thinkers of what we call Islamic Fundamentalism, Islamic radicalism, radical Islam, Islamic Fundamentalism, namely one Sayyad Qutb, Qutb. You can look it up on meaningfullife.com. And actually, I see that he's one of the big influences on Iranian thinking. And Khomeini, the Iranian military revolution in 1979, that overthrew the Shah, very much influenced by Qutb. So basically, it's a radical philosophy that some say is embraced by most Muslims. I don't know most, but a large number. That essentially calls for, yes, that God chose Islam over after Judaism and Christianity, which failed, according to him, to control the world in the name of God. And it's a religious war. The reason that's not emphasized, I think, firstly, the Western world refuses to accept that. It's very uncomfortable to feel this as a religious war. Many think it's a thing of the past. I think Israel also doesn't like that. Because then the war takes on a whole different level. It's not just a matter of winning and losing. You're talking about a philosophy, a theology. And then you have to bring your theology into it. What do you believe? I think that's one of the reasons it's not talked about as much as it should be. But it definitely lies at the heart, because you have to know what drives. Why does Iran hate Israel so much? You ever think about it? Why does it call for its destruction? Leave them alone. What is Israel doing to Iran? So I understand they have that excuses, the Palestinians, and this, but it ultimately comes down because of religious reasons. Israel is, by its very existence, a desecration of God according to these Muslim thinking people, these Muslim thinkers, this Muslim philosophy. I don't know if I want to call it a philosophy. The truth is, they have to come to a conclusion, as the Christians ultimately did, at least most of them, like the United States, that yes, Christianity and Islam both are born from Judaism, embrace the beautiful things, all children of Abraham, and respect your older cousins, and above all, that everybody's created in a divine image. Islam has not yet come to that market correction, let's put it that way. But we have to know that that's where we want them to come to. And it should be talked about. So a follow-up question to that, did the Rebbe comment on the Islamic Revolution and Khomeini? Interestingly, he did. He did in 1979, when Khomeini rose, and then there were 50,000 Jews, remember, in Iran. So it was dangerous to them as well. That was when many of them started coming out. I remember when they came to America, we took them into our homes for a while until they found their place. But in general, Iran was beginning to rattle their sabers, took hostages, if you recall, returned them after Reagan became president. This was during the time of Jimmy Carter, the president. Took 52 American hostages, kept them, and then started declaring America as the devil, using words like the Zionist Crusader conspiracy. These are all concepts from Kitab and from other Islam fundamentalist thinkers. So the Rebbe spoke about it. Motzei Shabbos Chayesara, Tavshin Lametes. So we're talking about it's already Tavshin Mem, rather. 1979, November 1979. It's already Tavshin Mem. Motzei Shabbos Chayesara, the Rebbe was Fabringen still then, Motzei Shabbos after the heart attack. And that's when the Rebbe said that though Chabad doesn't do Taina Shas, we don't focus on fasting, but if someone will do a fast, we'll support it. And Chav Gimel Kislev that year, there was a Taina Shas for the crisis that was going on. Part of it was the Iranian threat. And the Rebbe spoke about the weakness of America, and that the Iranians and the Arab world are starting to see that weakness. So it's a whole new world, new challenges. And that weakness is being put pressure on Israel. Very similar to what we see today. And Israel has to hold strong. And the real solution for Eretz Yisrael is not to be Nispal. That's what he talks about there. Not like some who argue that we have to be careful and be timid in the face of nations. He says, no, he brings a lesson from Yosef HaTzadik. Parshas and those Parshas. Shem Shemayim Shogar B'fiv. He spoke with God's name, and that's what made him a Ish Matzliach, and the mighty empire called the Egyptian Empire respected him for that. That when Jews will hold strong with God, all the nations of the world, including Iran, will respect them. So check out the Sikha Chayesara, Motzei Shabbos Chayesara Tavshin Mem, 1979, November 1979. And then the Taina Shas that Rebbe spoken, it's Mugi, it's printed today in Likutei Sichos, volume 20, in the Yisuf is Chav Gimel Kislev. It was a Taina Shas, where the Rebbe speaks there at the end as well about holding strong. The theme we spoke about earlier. So obviously we have to be prudent, and obviously we want to get along with the United States, we got along with the nations of the world, but not that they should dictate terms based on their interests and based on politics and weakness. And the more the Jewish people in Israel stand up and say, we are the people of God and God put us here, the more respect we'll get and the more success we'll have. The Rebbe also referred to Tavshin Mem, the interview with a Israeli journalist, radio. There he doesn't make direct mention to Khomeini, but he makes mention of radical Islam, where he talks about Tzivus Hashem. The Rebbe's asked, why establish Tzivus Hashem? children's organization. And the Rebbe says briefly, I'll just sum it up, that he knows from inside sources, confidential sources, that there's a shift. There's a seismic shift happening in the Muslim world. That there was a time in the past, you had to deal with sheiks, with leaders who could be bought off with a car, with a house, with money. He says now the power is shifting to the young, and the more radical they are, the more respected they are. And you can't buy them off. He says in the Jewish world, the opposite. In the beginning, meaning in 1948, when the young people were pioneers, chalutzim. They were excited and passionate about Eretz Yisrael. He says now the young are becoming more passive, more apathetic. So the Rebbe said, so exact opposite. What could I do, I thought, to infuse young people, young Jews, with passion? So he said, so you have a Tzivus Hashem. I remember the names that Rebbe said. When you have a Yaakov in Tel Aviv, another Jewish boy or girl in London, in New York, and they all say together Shema Yisrael, and they say it with passion and fervor to reawaken the Jewish spirit. That's how the Rebbe explains Tzivus Hashem. So all this is extremely relevant today, and prescient, you can even say. The Rebbe years ago, we're talking about almost 40 years ago now. Tov Shemem till now, we're talking about 44 years ago. So these are lessons we can derive for our time. So finally, one more question in this spirit. Should we all start buying property in Israel now, in case we need to go run there? And the moment Mashiach comes, we have a home to go to. It would really be bad if we all went to Israel without a plan and had to stay in a hot tent without air conditioning for a few months until permanent accommodations were found. Okay, fine. Well, Mashiach comes, you'll do what has to be done. I'm sure it's not a question of how hot or cold it will be. This is already a personal question. I cannot answer this in any general way, in any sweeping way. Every person has to decide, just like we spoke about many times, whether you should move to Eretz Yisrael. It's a personal question. The Rebbe's general approach is that if you're not needed for an organization or a community or something else here, not so simple. You can't just pick yourself up because people need you. If that's not the case, or you can do something in Israel that's equally valued, or even more, a real position that people need you. It's not just for your own comfort, for your own retirement, so to speak, and satisfaction. It's another story. So I think that would go into that same response to that. Okay. Since we're talking about divisiveness and unity, about sinas chinam and destruction, and now 9 days, so another question that came in from the same individual was, why are we not doing more to unite Jews? If so much of our blessings come from Jewish unity, why isn't there a more deliberate effort to unite us all? If we are losing a Jewish person to intermarriage and other factors, why aren't we all uncomfortable in doing everything we can to keep us all together? Why isn't there a mandate within the observant circles to constantly include and invite our non-religious brethren to our homes and related events? I don't understand how we can claim to be comfortable if we are constantly at risk amongst ourselves due to ignorance and a lack of love for each other. If we aren't uncomfortable, we may not be growing. This has been a timeless quote. Can it be that we now have to chart a new chapter in our history with a new direction? It's clear that the Holocaust generation is behind us, but our current generation has new challenges: moral relativism, decadence, materialism, consumerism, and for some socialism. Why do we have to wait for a crisis to rise to the challenge? So I couldn't agree more with a positive call for unity. That is the call of the hour. And everyone possible, everyone that we can reach that creates more unity, whether it's inviting people, friends, strangers, others. So I can't emphasize that, especially as we enter now the 9 days. And we spoke before, divisiveness, baseless hatred is what destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. So the only thing that rebuilds it, and we're told in Yerushalmi that every generation that doesn't rebuild the Beis Hamikdash is as if they destroyed it. So there's no question that this is the call of the hour, especially with what's going on. The stronger, the more united we are, the stronger we are, period. Okay. What should be our attitude to Jewish anti-Semites? Okay, painful subject, but I'll address it as well because it's also part of this. Remember, in the context of love and unity, Yitamu chatoim v'lo chaitim. We say, may their sins be erased, but not the sinners. Unity is to everyone. Obviously, not to someone that could directly hurt you, if you're going to show kindness and then they hurt you. But even there, we have to find a way, Yamin Mekareves, to show closeness, and even to people who are, unfortunately, are misguided or worse, or even deliberately destructive. We still love them, even if they have to be put into prison, frankly. A person can be a criminal in prison, you still love them, but they're unfortunately dangerous and they're destructive to others. So here's the question. It seems like the worst anti-Semites are Jews. Well, I want to be careful in the 9 days especially not to talk negative, but since you brought it up, and there are people, unfortunately, that are spewing venom against Jews, I think it's appropriate to talk about. But again, emphasize it's not personal. We're talking about the elimination of the attitude, of the chatoim, not the chitim, of the sins, not the sinners. Why isn't there a greater effort and push to bring these type of, he says, mentions names, I'm not going to mention names now because of the 9 days, to bring them back within our people. Some of them seem to love communism and communist ideology more than God and the Torah. Much of their agenda mirrors what the Russian ideology represents, and they're constantly bashing Israel. One of them is a Jew from Europe. His grandparents were religious Jews with the last name Schwartz. At one point, they dropped everything and became assimilated. He sees Jewish philanthropy as a crowded space. He abides by the Rambam's perspective of measuring himself on whether he's doing enough good in relation to his capacity. I hope that's the case. Unfortunately, he does not have love for the land of Israel and the Jewish people. I assume this is based on his statements and his actions. What should we do, if anything? So the answer to that is, as I said, if you have an opportunity in some way, would I invite them for Shabbos? I probably would. Maybe I wouldn't publicize it to see. But very likely it could end up being an argument because people have pride and ego and arrogance. But the goal is, my intention would be to try to somewhere find a soft spot, maybe. But you can't be naive either because they are in fact, they can actually use what you say against you. And say, you see that they support or endorsed my position. You never know with people like that. So I'm not going to in any way try to be soft about it. But at the end of the day, the truth is our heart cries and bleeds for people like this. How tragic. And even at the time of the Erev Rav, the time of the Moshe Rabbeinu, there were Jews that were unfortunately anti-Jewish. So we cry for them, we could pray for them. And if somewhere there's an opening, hopefully, I always hope that maybe one of my videos will reach them and they'll say, you know what, that's a good point. But I guess it's a little naive. I want to go back to one more question that I realized I should have asked earlier. So let's go back about what's the best way to fight our enemies. There's a saying that the best defense is a good offense. In relation to war, that would mean don't wait until the enemy attacks you and then respond back. If you see the enemy lining up troops and equipment at your border, attack them first. But what does Tehran and Halacha say about this? Are there precedents in Tanakh that we could apply to Iran that today is lining up their equipment and their proxies to attack us, and they have done it before and they are threatening to do it again? Would we be justified in attacking them first to minimize the damage they can do to us? Absolutely. 6-Day War actually was Israel that preempted the attack of the other countries. And sometimes that is the best method. You'll be much more, you're on the offense, the best defense is offense. About precedents, that we have to look up. So first of all, as I said before, we go by military strategy here. You don't necessarily need a halachic precedent for that. Halacha says, listen to the doctor. If that's the best military approach, like we said, Siman Shin Chavtes. Siman Shin is you're mobilizing. They haven't attacked you. You just know they've declared war on you. and they're your enemy. They're coming to talk to you about kashrut and about commerce. And you mobilize. So there you have the halacha, straight halacha. Because the bottom line is protecting life, whatever it takes. So this absolutely applies in a very direct way. Okay. With limited time, there's many more things I wanted to talk about. I just want to cover, let's see here. We'll do one follow-up, and we'll conclude with one shalom bias, being that it's the 9 days. I think appropriate to talk about that. So follow-up talked about the presidential election, and somebody was not satisfied with my way of answering it. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, why don't you openly come out against the current Democratic Party? That was essentially the question, but here's the details. Dear Rabbi Jacobson, I was surprised by the lack of clarity in your latest episode, 506, that's last week. You mentioned that the Rebbe's guidance regarding choosing politicians and political parties was to see which one promotes God and the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei, the 7 Noahide laws. Since the Democratic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, and the Democrats in general support the removal of any mention of God in the classroom or in public, they support late-term abortions, support social justice as opposed to justice, something which is explicitly and expressly forbidden in the Torah as the opposite of actual justice, seek to deny citizens the right to self-defense, promote perverse sexual practices, and seek to delegitimize the family structure of a happily married husband and wife with children. Why the ambivalence in calling a spade and saying that the Democrats don't support biblical values and actually actively promote the opposite? All of this is in addition to the fact that the Democrats, on the whole, with some exceptions, promote the shrinking and destruction of Israel and not its expansion and growth. I can say that I listen to you for your moral clarity and not for wishy-washy statements that seek to promote feelings over facts. Okay, I read it exactly the way you wrote it. My response will be as blunt as your question. If you did listen to what I've said, I'm speaking here Chassidus Applied, what I learned from the Rebbe. We talk about the concepts, not to be wishy-washy, but because we're not into politics. I'm not here to endorse Democrats or Republicans or not to endorse someone. It's not my job. My job is to try to apply Torah and Chassidus to a given situation. The given situation is that there are two political parties, two presidential candidates, and we have to think in terms of who's supporting God and Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei. And let's say they both are not. Who would support it more? What's better? Since you all, the audience, are intelligent people, you can take these principles and apply it to what you think you should do best. If you feel so strongly about the Democratic Party of being so antithetical to Torah and God, so of course that's your right. That's your right. That's your right how to vote, how not to vote. But you have to keep in mind, ain't tev b'lei rav, ain't rav b'lei tev. Nothing is pure good and nothing is pure evil. We're not talking here about Mashiach versus the devil. We're talking about human beings, all make mistakes. All the presidents have. Whoever ends up being president is going to be the president of the United States for the next 4 years. And then you also want to encourage to do as much as possible to promote Torah values and God. And yes, support Israel and all the other good things that we believe in. So it's important for some of us to be above the fray of the political decisions. That's individual decisions. So it's very deliberate how I speak. It wasn't wishy-washy. It wasn't by accident. It wasn't like I forgot to talk about it. I specifically want to talk about the concept, and then you can apply it as you see fit when you go to vote, into the election booth, whatever it's called. That's my response to that. And in general, if you follow the program, you'll see that's what I do with everything. It's not about personalizing and so on. So I think that responds to that. And finally, Mesaimim, since we're talking about unity, so a question came in, I thought it appropriate to address Shalom Bayis. Hi, Rabbi Jacobson. The question is, how do you distinguish between healthy compromise and becoming a doormat? What's the difference when it comes to shalom bayis with being mavater, that's compromising, and being a doormat? How can we know how to navigate these delicate intricacies with our spouse and prevent feeling despondent? So simple English comes down to this. There are times there's a disagreement between spouses. So of course compromise is always a good thing, but sometimes someone will say compromise could end up being like abuse. I'm giving up on a fundamental. So generally speaking, it's always better to be cautious, to err on the side of caution and being less confrontation. That's in general a rule. But in case you have that question, go to an objective party, a mashpia, and ask a mentor, is this an area that you should fight over? And I do agree, there are times that people just are pushovers, and they're pleasers, they don't want confrontation, and in turn, compromise on things they shouldn't compromise on. But not compromising something also doesn't mean you have to fight over it. There are other ways that you can deal with something without a total confrontation. So the first thing we have to establish, case by case, is this a situation that's worth addressing, or something, you could overlook, it's not such a big thing. And then once it is something you should address, how to address it in the most civil and Torah-dic way. My point that I want to make here is in general about disagreements. If you can put your ego aside, remember, ego can go both directions. Ego can be confronting. Ego could also be non-confronting because it's out of your comfort zone. But if we could put our egos aside, and we'll call it what this calls bittul, that's what brings shalom in this world. If you want blessings, barchenu avinu, kulanu ke'echad, through unity. And unity is looking and transcending your own needs, your own self, and allowing something other to enter into your world. That's the key to all love and to all shalom and to all unity. We have that, b'meila, we're mevatel, and eliminate the causes for destruction and bring the gula amitis v'ashlema. So may this be a month, this month of Av, a month of menachem of, a nichum. And nichum means transforming, nachemu nachmu, transforming all the negative elements, especially in Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe should protect the Eden there more than ever. Eretz Asher Eni Hashem Elokecha Bo Mereish Hashana V'ad Achri Shana. Protect the soldiers, protect the innocent, free the hostages. May we preempt all the words that they're saying, Utze Eitz V'Sufar, Davru Davar V'Yakum, that all their plotting and their conspiracy should be eliminated. L'chadchila, hafara, l'chadchila, not just mekana lahaba, eliminated. And we should only celebrate holidays and simchas. And we should do our part right now to bring as much simcha as we can through Pekudi Yesharim Mesamche, Pekudi Hashem Yesharim Mesamche Lev, Teira Mitzvahs Tziyim B'Mishpat Tepada V'Shaveh B'Tzedakah. We're coming to Shabbos Chazain. Chazain, on one hand, is the vision of Yeshaya, of destruction, but it concludes Tziyim B'Mishpat Tepada V'Shaveh B'Tzedakah, the vision, as Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchever teaches, that each of us is shown the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, the third temple, from a distance, in order to awaken the longing, the gaguyim, the yearning, to do everything we need to do to bring that Beis Hamikdash. And that is by Avis Yisrael, Achdus Yisrael, the 5 mitzvahs, the 10 mitzvahs, all the mitzvahs, especially the ones connected to bring shmira, protection, and the ones that bring blessings to the Yidden, Tamid Kol Hayomim, as we march into the Gula Hamitis Vashlema. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Kol Tuv and Afreilach and Chodesh Av.
This program is brought to you by MyLife Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.